This link is for 5th grade, going along with the story The Best Place to Be. If you go ahead and get out your hardcover Treasures textbook and turn to page 328 and 329, these are the two pages that we're going to be referencing and working with vocabulary words, vocabulary strategies, as well as our comprehension strategy for the week. The first off thing that I would like to begin is, of course, going over our vocabulary words that we're going to encounter in this particular unit. First word is scorching. Scorching means extremely hot and dry. The scorching sun wilted all the flowers. Gushed. Gushed means flooded out with sudden force. The water gushed from the fire hydrant. Landscape. A landscape is a scene or view. Sandy watched the desert landscape from her car. Parched. Parched means very dry or thirsty. Plants become parched when they are deprived of water. Brimming. Brimming means filled to the top and almost overflowing. Lisa's eyes were brimmed with tears. Scrawny. Scrawny means very thin, skinny. Scrawny has a negative connotation because it means something is too skinny. So, a scrawny due to lack of sun. Gnarled. Something that is gnarled has a rough, twisted look. The gnarled roots of the swamp cypress grow over land and water. And then we have the word progress. Progress means forward moving or improvement. Doug was making admirable progress on the set design for the play. Okay, now with that being said, could you go ahead and look at page 328 in your Treasures textbook, and let's talk a little bit about a vocabulary strategy, which is connotation. Now, a thesaurus entry will include several different synonyms for a word. Each synonym will carry negative or positive feelings, which are called connotations. For example, we talked about scrawny. Scrawny has a negative connotation. It would not be a positive word to describe a trim athlete. It would be used negatively. Okay? Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and direct our attention to the story, The Best Place to Be. It's by Carmela Ramirez. My new friend Janine just moved here from North Carolina. She's always talking about how different Arizona is from her home, Janine said before soccer practice last week. North Carolina is the best place to be. How can you say that? I exclaimed as I closed the top of the team's ice chest, brimming with ice and so many drinks that I hardly pressed it shut. There are plenty of mountains here. It's different in North Carolina, Janine explained. Our mountains have tall, leafy trees, she said as she walked to the field. The forests are filled with raccoons, deer, and bear. My dad and I used to hike along a stream near our house. The water there gushed over the rocks and would splash us. The landscape and scenery was rocky, a view. Arizona's mountains are filled with wildflowers and animals, I said. The bighorn sheep are my favorite. Don't you mind the scorching sun burning your lawn? Janine asked. The grass around here always looks parched and thirsty from the lack of water. The ground is cracked and dried. The trees are scrawny and thin. Their gnarled and twisted branches grow so slowly. Still, you won't see mountains like these anywhere, I said. People think Arizona's mountains glow from the sun, I continued, sounding like a travel book. All my talking paid off, though. This week at soccer practice, I found that I had made progress convincing Janine that Arizona was a great place to live. I felt there was a definite improvement in her attitude towards her new home. I saw the neatest thing, she said. The tiniest bird flew into a hole in this huge cactus. There are so many beautiful things to see in the desert, don't you think? It's the place to be, I told her, as we both ran out onto the field. Okay, so this week's comprehension skill or strategy that we're going to be talking about is comparing and contrasting. Now, making inferences and analyzing about what happened in a story allows you to notice the similarities and the differences between characters, events, and settings. Now, a Venn diagram will help you compare and contrast these similarities and differences. Now, we're going to use my makeshift version of a Venn diagram as we reread through the story and comparing and contrasting North Carolina and Arizona. So before we jump into that, I want you to think about this. To identify similarities between characters or events, in a text, you need to look for words that are signals. Things like both, also, to, just, as, or like. Now to identify the differences, you want to look for words such as but, different, unlike, or on the other hand. All right, now let's go ahead and go back to the beginning of the story, The Best Place. I'm going to go ahead and read through the first couple paragraphs, and then we're going to talk a little bit further about how we can do a comparison and contrast here. My new friend Janine just moved here from North Carolina. She's always talking about how different Arizona is from her old home. I really miss the mountains, Janine said before soccer practice last week. North Carolina is the best place to be. How can you say that? I exclaimed as I closed the top of the team's ice chest. It was brimming with ice and so many drinks that I could hardly press it shut. There are plenty of mountains here. Okay, so I'm going to stop right there. As I begin to read the story, I notice that Janine talks about the differences between North Carolina and Arizona. So Janine uses the signal word different when she compares the mountains in North Carolina to those in Arizona. So with this being said, we already know that both North Carolina and Arizona, they both have mountains. Okay, so let's go ahead and put that one thing that they have in common is that they have mountains, okay? And the things that are different about the mountains is that it starts off telling us that it's different in North Carolina. And let's go ahead and read about how it's different, okay? We're going to put, let's put Arizona here, and we'll put North Carolina here. All right, with that being said, let's continue to read. Now, it's different in North Carolina, Janine explained. Our mountains have tall, leafy trees, he said. The forests are filled with raccoons, deer, and bear. My dad and I used to go hiking along the stream near our house. The water there gushed over the rocks and would splash up on us. The landscape and the scenery was rocky, but what a view! Arizona's mountains are filled with wildflowers and animals, I said. The bighorn sheep are my favorite. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk a little bit here that there's one more thing that they have alike. Now the mountains, both mountains in both states have animals as well. And so I just want to put that down as another thing that they have alike. But of course in that paragraph that we just began reading, is we said how they were different. Janine says, our mountains have tall leafy trees. So we can say tall leafy trees. She also says that they have raccoons, bears, deer, and she also talks about a body of water, and that body of the water is a stream. Okay, let's continue to read about Arizona's mountains. Now they said that of course they have animals as well, but they have the wildflowers. They have the bighorn sheep. Let's see what else Arizona has that North Carolina doesn't. Don't you mind the scorching sun burning your lawn? Janine asked. The grass around here always looks parched and thirsty from the lack of water. The ground is cracked and dried, the trees are scrawny and thin, and their gnarled and twisted branches grow so slowly. So another thing that we can add is that it has hot weather. Okay, let's continue to read. Still, you won't see mountains like these anywhere, I said. People say Arizona's mountains glow from the sun. I continued, sounding like a travel book. Now, all my talking paid off, though. This week was at soccer practice. I found that I had made progress convincing Janine that Arizona was a great place to live. I felt there was a definite improvement in her attitude towards her new home. I saw the neatest thing, she said. The tiniest bird flew into a hole in the huge cactus. There are so many beautiful things to see in the desert, don't you think? It's the place to be, I told her as we both ran out into this field. Okay, so another thing that we can say is that there's a desert, and that in the desert there is also a cactus. Okay, so therefore we went ahead and compared and contrasted Arizona and North Carolina. Now, you want to go ahead and do this as you're reading, just because it's good to make sure you're seeing exactly what the author is stating. With that said, let me remind you one more time that the signal words that you want to look for when you're comparing things is they're going to use the word both, also, to, just, as, and like. And if they're going to identify differences, you're going to look for the words but, different, unlike, or on the other hand. Okay? With that being said, today you have a vocabulary page that you're going to work on, which is page 96 in your practice book. So referencing back to those vocabulary words that I went over earlier in this link. But then also realize that tomorrow your practice book page 97 is going to be working with comparing and contrasting, actually using a compare and contrast chart while referencing another paragraph. And the paragraph is actually going to be about trees. Now, with that being said, that's going to go ahead and conclude this link. Of course, if you have further questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to contact me.